It's time for us to wake up and take back New Zealand. Our freedoms, our land, our future, our way of life is under threat. We deserve a government that is loyal to New Zealand, a government for Kiwis, by Kiwis. We are farmers, business owners, youth workers, builders, teachers. We are everyday people who want our government to respect us and our taxes again. I'm Leighton Baker, the leader of New Conservative. Let's take back New Zealand together. Stand up, vote New Conservative.
Hello, Mitch. I guess we're on.
Well, hello, Victoria. How's things in North Auckland there?
Things are very good. And, of course, here you are in Wellington. And now, so, of course, why we are here and straight to business. So tell us a little bit about who you are and, what do you do? And, of course, and we'll get around to why we're having this interview at all. So you go ahead, Mitch.
All right, I'll give you a short one of myself. I went to gunsmithing school in 1973, graduated with an associate in applied science and gunsmithing degree from Trinidad State Junior College in Southern Colorado. Came back to Kentucky, became a tool and die maker after a 4-year apprentice and 2-year training program. So I'm a state certified tool and die maker. Got my pilot's license in 1976, got my scuba license at about that time. High school, I did skydiving. So what you can see as a commonality in all of this is self-responsibility for actions that I engage in. And it's one of the things that becomes a part of a follow-up on how I work in relation to other people, is that I take a responsibility for some of those actions. It's sort of like what is referred to as a Good Samaritan. And we can get into Good Samaritan laws, and I've had issues with that in the States where it was good, happened over there. And then I've had a situation over here where a pilot down at Kaikoura went to rescue a couple of people, and Westpac said, no, they couldn't get in. It's too dangerous. And this guy says,
I remember
I
that. Yeah.
And so he got in his helicopter, flew down, got the people out. CAA brought charges against him for not having a medical certificate, which is a requirement to be a pilot. I wrote him a letter about that, and I said, look, you need to defend yourself under the Good Samaritan laws, which New Zealand doesn't have. And I even sent him some money for his lawyer fees on that. He tried it and was unsuccessful. So this is one of the things that I'm hoping New Conservative will really look at is supporting a Good Samaritan law. And if you don't know what that is, it's where somebody is in danger and somebody goes to assist. And if something goes wrong, the person ends up in a worse condition than they were, then the person attempting to do the good deed cannot be held accountable for something that went wrong. They tried.
Very interesting. And I think it's something that is definitely worth considering.
That's part of my mantra for life.
So tell me about your gunsmithing experience, and also into your competitive experience. Yeah.
When I became a tool and die maker, it's one of those things, and I was just watching Jerry Micklick, the fantastic pistol shooter he is. And he and I have both similar mental approaches to how we go about shooting. I'll say this, and I'll give this to my good friend as a credit to what he said to me one time. Richard Herron, state policeman from Kentucky, and his father was killed by the Germans in one of the mass murders that they committed over there. But he said, in order to be a shooter, you've got to give up God, country, and family. And as brash as that sounds, that's pretty much what you have to do. You have to give up and dedicate your entire life if you want to be a top-end shooter. Well, I did that. So I started shooting in 1983. My first international shoot-off was in 1986, which is unheard of in 3 years of competition. I became the 600th person in over 100 years in the United States to get what is referred to as the Distinguished Rifleman Award from the U.S. Army as a civilian. That was presented to me by Colonel Gilchrist at a special meeting of the Kentucky Rifle Association. Quite a surprise. I then went on to represent the United States in 3 international competitions. 1992 was at Raton. 1995 was in New Zealand. And I just happened to dig this out just a while ago. That's the team photo we had. And then 1999 in South Africa. Then after that, I came to New Zealand. And the reason I came to New Zealand, if you're going to get into that issue later on, is that I was going through a divorce in 1994. It was a horrible situation. I ended up losing my farm in the process of it, not because of my fault. It was because of the way the laws are written. And there were two things that happened in 1993. You'll remember at about that time in 92, George Herbert Walker Bush was beaten by Bill Clinton. And there are reasons why that happened. And they all relate back to the Mena, Arkansas, the Iran-Contra affair. So I won't get too far into that. But what happens is that Bill Clinton, once he came in, William Barr, the current attorney general, was the attorney general at the time, appointed originally by George Bush, Herbert Walker Bush, and Ruby Ridge occurred. Now, this is where Randy Weaver was asked to shorten a barrel by a undercover agent of the BATF. He did. He shortened it to 17 3/4 inches. Well, in the States, a barrel less than 18 inches is illegal. So they shortened it by 1/4 of an inch too much. So they put Randy up on charges. He went to the court like he was supposed to, only to find out that the BATF and the federal government had moved it up a week ahead. So he got there a week late. That meant that he was convicted of the charges without defending himself. Well, a short time later after that, the federal marshals came in and started harassing him, ended up shooting his son, shooting their dog. There was a 51-day standoff at Ruby Ridge. And during that time, Randy was shot unarmed. The neighbor's boy was shot unarmed. Vicki Weaver, holding their baby in the doorway unarmed, was shot and killed by a guy by the name of Lou Harachi. So this is where I have some issues of what happens in my shooting experience back at Camp Perry. There's a guy that taught Lou Harachi to shoot for the FBI was Bert Medina, one of my fellow shooters that I shot with. And when he told me that, it's kind of like we didn't talk quite as much after that. So then you go into a few months later and you have Waco. And we had a huge amount of propaganda going around the United States at the time on that. It was basically for the BATF and for Bill Clinton to prove his position as being anti-gun. Now here it is. I'm a national champion at this point in time. And I become a national champion, 4 more times after that point. So how would you feel like being an American national rifle champion in a country where Bill Clinton is going after gun owners and I am a target because I'm also a gun dealer? So that was the real reason for me leaving the United States at that point in time.
So would you say that there are echoes now as to what is happening in New Zealand?
Oh, it does. It reverberates completely, because now what you've got is a socialist prime minister who says she wasn't socialist a couple of days ago, and yet she was the president of the Socialist Youth International from 2008 till 2010, uses the phrases comrade, comrade, comrade several times, which is all euphemisms of a communist presenter. So what I'm looking at now is all of this going on. Plus, the interesting part, and I don't tell this to a whole lot of people, is I had a visit from 2 Wellington police detectives. And they called me up one day and he said, hey, we need to have a talk with you. I said, well, look, I'm too busy to have any time for you right now. So he calls me back in a week later and says, look, we really need to have a talk with you. And I said, well, yeah, okay, come on out. He said, we can come out in an unmarked police car if you want to do that. It doesn't matter what you drive, that's fine. Comes out here with another officer and we start having a chat, and this is all prearranged. The first thing he says, we think you're a Trump supporter. And I said, well, yeah, I voted for him. And your problem? But we think Trump supporters are white racist and supremacists. And I said, look, I've never met either one, nor do I associate with either types of those people in the United States or New Zealand. Third question was, but we see that you have watched a video on YouTube about human demographics. And I said, well, yeah, I did. And by the way, what was wrong with it? So one of the things that comes up out of that is now they're monitoring me internationally. And they can either do it through a court order in New Zealand to get a warrant to do that, or they can go through the 5I system. I don't know which method they use, but they did it. Now, the interesting part is I wasn't the only one asked those questions. And in fact, Lee Williams was asked those exact same questions in the exact same order. So I'm kind of going, it's like, this is an intentional act of fascism by the current regime that's in power, Jacinda. I have asked Brent Hudson for an apology. I have asked Chris Bishop for an apology.
I think we're going to have to be waiting for a while.
Yeah.
Yes, we know that some people have had an apology. Well, let's just say that the IPCA has come out and said that police didn't quite follow the right procedure for some visits that happened in Christchurch. I don't believe the people themselves received an apology. So I think you're going to be waiting for a while. Anyway, so let's get back to so we know each other, of course, through competition, and so I'm wearing one of our competition shirts, and we shoot IPSC, right? So and we've competed against each other in the same division and everything. So you've obviously moved to New Zealand. When was it? Which year was it?
1998.
1998. Okay. So and you've lived in Wellington the whole time?
Yes.
Okay. And you, which club do you belong to down there? Do you belong to several clubs, yeah?
Hayward's Pistol Club. Bruce Cole is our president. Fantastic guy. He gave me a lot of assistance when I had a court case against a rival gun organization. And I won part of the case. In fact, the issues that I raised proved to be consequential because they ended up having the same accidents later on that I was complaining about.
Right. So in New Zealand,
I started when I came to New Zealand in '98. I came over as a competitive rifle shooter.
Right.
I know you saw that pile of medals like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's only
the competitions. The national competitions you won in the US, that was quite well attended, wasn't it? Yes.
This is an interesting point because 1990 through 95, when I was winning U.S. national, setting U.S. national records, we would have a maximum of 880 competitors available to shoot at Camp Peary, and we shot that on 2 different ranges simultaneously. And so I was shooting against Coast Guard, Navy, Army, Marines, the Army Reserve team, the Army team. I was shooting against all of the services in order to win those competitions. This is 850 to 880 of the best competitors in the United States. That's what I was competing against.
Yeah.
Over here,
so you did quite well then.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I won 52 regional championships. That's going to be setting me apart from most other people. I set the U.S. national record in 1995 that stood for 8 years. David Tubbs finally beat it by a few X's. David's a great competitor, and I really got a lot of good things to say about him. I knew his dad, in fact. And part of the safety conscious attitude that I have towards shooting is that I shot with George Tubb, David's dad, at one point in time. Now, I'll give you an example here of why I do the things that I do. George is a fantastic Texas gentleman, but he had bad knees. He had fought in World War II in Europe. So that when we did the procedure for shooting and setting position, we started with a gun, 5 rounds in it, 1 in the chamber with the bolt closed. We stood from standing, we went down in position when the targets started up, and then we started engaging the targets. The problem was George's knees were so bad that when he went down, he swung his rifle facing everybody down the line. And I said to George, after he got through finishing shooting, I said, George, we got a problem here. You're infilating your fire down the line. And I said, we need to do something about that. Here's how effective the U.S. NRA was. The next year, we had a rule change. George precipitated it because he was the head of the NRA High Power Committee. So what happened was we now started out 5 rounds in the gun, chamber empty, bolt open. So you went down into position and then you closed the gun. It was a tremendous safety effort on their part to change that. And it worked. I was quite happy with it.
So Mitch, obviously, with all of this background, you're extremely well qualified, competitively and professionally,
Yep.
and so what I'd like to bring out here is you support New Conservative, and
Absolutely.
obviously you've been doing a lot of work with New Conservative. Can you tell me what drew you to New Conservative in the first place, and then we'll get to, in fact, why you agreed to come on here on this live stream, which is quite exposing, really, because most of us don't want to appear live, and definitely not in public. And you're a very private person. So first of all, tell us why you're supporting New Conservative, and then why you decided it was important for you to appear today.
Right. Well, I support New Conservative on several bases. As a gun owner, a lot of people are voting for one party or another simply on one single issue, the gun issue. I think that's a highly important reason for voting for a party, but cannot be the sole preposition for why you're going to support an organization. I support New Conservative because it supports the strong values that I'm associated with coming from the United States, of a person who supports the U.S. Constitution, the freedoms that are specifically adhered to in the amendments to the U.S. Constitution: freedom of speech, press, assembly, the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, the right to avoid search and seizure without warranted cause, and the rest of the 10 amendments are referred to as the God-given rights. And this is exactly what New Conservative is supporting. And I don't mean it in the connotation that you have to be religious in order to go along with these values. But these are a philosophical value of the Judeo-Christian ethics, which is what our legal system is based on. So if you can't support that, then you don't support anything, or you support the opposing end of it, of Marxism or Leninism for communism, or Stalinism for something even worse than that, or Maoism. I would love to see New Zealand have its own constitution, and I think that's where we want to all work for at some point in time. One of the things that we came across in some of the high court decisions and some of the gun issues was originally the Kiwi Party had a legal action against the government, in part over the ammunition ban, but on the gun issues as well. And the High Court came back with a decision that was quite interesting. It said that effectively Parliament has a right to supersede your individual human rights or personal rights that you have under New Zealand law. Then COFO did exactly the same thing. They brought the same issues against the New Zealand government, and they lost, and they got the same result. And my comment on that kind of a situation is going back to Einstein. His statement about somebody that repeats an experiment time after time, what are they? And they're referred to as an idiot. I hate to say it in this strong term, but that's pretty much where it goes to. We have no basis of permanent law and self-protection in New Zealand. In the States, we do. This is one of the things that I did in the States, was taught concealed carry. So in other words, if you lived in Kentucky under my jurisdiction as a teacher, then I was able to teach you the state requirements for you to procure a handgun that you could carry on your person for self-defense. This goes back to my previous issue of being able to determine my own degree of safety in the sports that I was previously involved with. Everything from skydiving, scuba diving, and being a pilot. So it's watch out for your self-interest. You take care of yourself. Over here, I've got the opposite opinion that this government doesn't want you to do anything. It wants to control everything. So you don't have the right to defend yourself effectively in New Zealand, even though it has been done a few times. We need to address some of these changes.
So what has brought you to speak today?
Well, again, I don't want to make this a single issue party, because it's not. We are against the degree of abortion that has occurred in the last set of laws. We are in disagreement with David Seymour's euthanasia, which I keep referring back to as a preamble for what becomes eugenics. You look up Margaret Sanger in the 1920s, and it's what the Nazis followed in the 1930s. The philosophical views of the party from Eliot, you look out for your neighbor, your friend, you look out for your community. And this is something you definitely don't see in the national or labor parties, is that they want to determine everything that you're going to do. The philosophical view of New Conservative Party is exactly in line with what I want. And I think the farmers are seeing that. I think the people that have got an ethics or ethos that they want to live by are seeing that as well. So I think that's where our great strength is going to come from in this election this coming week. It's not just from the gun people, but I think it's going to be from the good people of New Zealand who want to see us to return back to where the grassroots of this country really evolved from, which is what made this country great to start with. And
so what you're saying is that you're voting for your values, yes?
I'm voting for my values. That's exactly it.
Okay, that's good. Now, you said that because you're based in Wellington, and I believe Nicole McKee from ACT is also based in Wellington. You know her?
I've known
Yes.
Nicole McKee for probably a good 20 years now. I taught Mountain Safety Council Firearms Licensing in Wellington for over 2 years with her and Sam Stevenson. She's made some comments over the years that really bother me. Like she said there was no reason for anybody having a 300 Winchester Magnum or bigger in New Zealand, which now you've seen that pop up a few times in legislation. She's on the Firearms Advisory Committee to the police. She has been there and made a statement as the Secretary of COFO, which is the one that really upset me. And apparently she made it on TV as well. But she's come back and she said, no, it didn't happen. She said she never said it. But her comment was, as the Secretary of COFO, was that we may have to accept the loss of certain categories of guns in order to keep others. Well, who is she to determine which guns are going to be given up in order to keep the others? And who's making that determination? She has dealt like.
Did she? So hang on. She did say that she didn't say it.
You said that.
But yeah, she did say that. But you believe she did say it, and others have as well. But
yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have a recording of it. So yeah, it's a bit difficult from that viewpoint. However, yeah. So regardless, so you know Nicole from a long time, but regardless, you still believe that New Conservative is the right one for you and not ACT, because like myself, right at the start, we were all casting around for a champion. We felt that, I'm sure you considered ACT as well, as did I.
Yeah. We all considered ACT at one point, simply because David Seymour cast the only vote against the gun law. Now, we have to put that in perspective, because it's not quite what that sounds. What he said was that he did not support the speed with which the action took place. In other words, there was insufficient time for consideration. In fact, that was more or less a direct quote from what he said. Therefore, he didn't support it. So it had nothing to do with not supporting the gun issues themselves. It was the fact that there was insufficient time for consideration, which made the police look bad and the government look bad. He said that later on as well. But he's never said anything about the actual gun laws themselves being wrong. And I've seen Nicole McKee's proposition of putting semi-automatic shotguns in a category 2, and they're all separate and all of that. Whereas New Conservative has the idea we want to repeal the 2 tranches of laws that have already passed. And I think that's the only way you're going to get out of this thing. I don't see New Zealand coming along and creating a Second Amendment like the U.S. has, even though I can say this. If I could pull it out in time, which is right over here someplace, is about a 1927, 1929 Army manual on rifle marksmanship. And what it said was for the officers to get into the leadership of the gun clubs. And I'll give you a little history there. In 1966, on the 1966 New Zealand Encyclopedia, there were over 250 ranges throughout New Zealand. Right now, there's about 10. That's how far it's
Really?
gone. Yeah, excuse me. Back that up. There were over 100 ranges in New Zealand at the time, and there were 2,500 members in the NRA at that time in 1966.
Right.
Correction there. Right now, there's about 10 ranges left, and they only had 63 or 64 New Zealanders competing in the Nationals this last year. So it's only a matter of time before that organization falls apart. And as much as I hate to see it go, they have brought it on themselves. In fact, the current or the previous president, I'm not sure who's in right now, on 2 remits tried to get the name New Zealand National Rifle Association removed to make it New Zealand Target Rifle something or another, because he did not want the connotation of National Rifle Association bearing up semblance to the US NRA. So that's the kind of problems that they've had over the years, and they have not brought on the youth to bring into the next generation of shooters. And this is where I look at the pistol shooting, and it's absolutely fantastic because you went through IPSC training as an RO. I did as well. Probably 85% of us in the IPSC field have gone through range officers training course, which is usually about a 2-day course. Fantastic. If you're an NRA range officer instructor or range officer in New Zealand, you had to wait several years to get on the list to do it. And at the time that I went through it, Nicole was sitting on my left and Kevin Wynn was sitting on my right. And it was like the 2 biggest range violators in the whole country right there. Let me give you an example of how bad things can really get. This is going to carry outside of the party issues discussions that we're getting into, but it's the kind of things that I have had to fight all along.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry, if we're going to carry outside the party issues, well, yeah, we're going to end up having a chat all night.
So let's carry on with your issues.
Yeah. Well, so hang on. We're actually coming up close to time now because it is half an hour. But thank you very much, Mitch. Greatly appreciate your time and also your insights, especially coming as you have from Kentucky all the way back then. And also the fact that you are so highly qualified in your field, not just as a professional gunsmith, but also as a competitor. And you've been in New Zealand for so long. So thank you very much, and we greatly appreciate your support, and I hope to see you on the range again very soon.
And God bless New Zealand, Elliot and Leighton, and let's hope we do well.
Yes, I'm pretty sure we will. All right. Thank you, Mitch. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
It's time for us to wake up and take back New Zealand. Our freedoms, our land, our future, our way of life is under threat. We deserve a government that is loyal to New Zealand, a government for Kiwis, by Kiwis. We are farmers, business owners, youth workers, builders,